Year 7 and 8 then, this is going to be your last practical in your rotation of food and nutrition this year, and I'm going to demonstrate for you how to make a pasta bake. Now, if you haven't got the ingredients to make this at home, or if you haven't got anyone that's able to supervise you making this, please don't make this. But if you have got someone to supervise you and haven't got the ingredients, please, as always, help someone make the dinner, whatever they were going to make for dinner. You step in and you can help them with it. But pasta bake then. First things first, we're going to get our oven preheated, and we're going to do that to about 180 or gas mark 5. There we are. If you haven't got a fan assisted oven, it's about 200 degrees you'll need for that. Obviously, as always, we're going to get ourselves ready to cook, so I've put an apron on, I've washed my hands. If my hair touched my shoulders, I would be tying it back. And then I just wipe down my surfaces. By now you know what you're doing, so I'm not even going to talk you through it any more than that. Now, to put your pasta bake in, it's going to get cooked on the hob, then it's going to be put into a dish and put into the oven. So you're going to need an oven-proof dish. That means the dish can go in the oven without melting or breaking. So I've got here an oven-proof dish, it's a glass one. Now, because there's 3 adults in my house, I'm going to have a slightly larger dish like this. But depending on how many people are in your house will depend on how much pasta you cook, which will depend on how big a dish you will need. As well as going into the oven, your dish is going to sit on a baking tray. The baking tray has got handles, because not every dish has got handles like this. The baking tray will just prevent the dish actually being on the shelf, which might make it very hot and could break it. But it's also going to be easier to get in and out the oven because it's definitely got these sides to it. So I've got my oven-proof dish ready. Something else you're going to need for this recipe is a colander. A colander is what you would strain pasta or potatoes in, or vegetables in. I've found one that I've got at home which has got a base on it, and if you've got one with a base on it, that's really helpful because later on you're going to place this in the sink and you're not going to hold on to it. Sadly, mine doesn't have handles, but I'd hope yours would have handles on either side so that when you've drained your pasta and all the hot water is gone, you'll be able to pick it up to put it into your container. So you need a colander. You're also going to need 2 saucepans, okay? I've got a medium-sized saucepan and a large saucepan. The large saucepan I'm going to cook my pasta in. The smaller saucepan I'm going to use to fry off my vegetables, okay? So, next stage then is to get the ingredients you need for this pasta bake. The recipe that I'm going to put in your lesson PowerPoint is going to be for 100 grams of pasta. However, 100 grams of pasta generally is about enough for one person's meal, okay, for an adult. So if there's 2 adults and a child, you might want to maybe put 270 grams of pasta in. Because we've got 3 adults, I've got 300 grams of pasta. Dry pasta this is as well, so we're going to cook it in a minute. I know that you know how to weigh pasta. I'm not going to show you how to do that, but I've got that ready to go. And then you're going to have your flavourings that go in your pasta bake. Now, because one way or another I've shown you how to prepare these in the videos I've shown you previously, I've prepared them today, you don't need to watch. I've got some mushrooms here. It does say, I think, 4 on the recipe, but I've used a few more than that because I quite like mushrooms. I've got a pepper here, it doesn't matter what colour, and I've just chopped those into chunks. The mushrooms I've just sliced up. Obviously make sure you wash your vegetables before you use them. I've also got a courgette, and I've just cut that down the middle, flattened it out, and then made some rainbow smiles, whatever you want to call them, pieces out of them. These are all prepared and ready to go. You could also use, and I'm not going to, a tin of sweet corn that you sieve over the sink so that the liquid that's in the sweet corn goes down the sink and you then are left with just the sweet corn. I'm not going to use that. You could use some frozen peas. Again, they would be in your freezer. You'd be able to take them out and just add them in when I tell you later on. I'm not going to do that one, but you could add peas in, that's absolutely fine. Protein-wise, you've got 2 choices really for this one. You could get some chopped ham, so you can get some ham and cut it up into pieces. You'll need to get that prepared and ready to go. Just like everything else you see here, I'm all prepared before I do anything and before I turn any heat on the pans. However, I'm using tuna today. The recipe's for 1 tin of tuna. The tuna tins I happen to have in are actually quite small, so I've used 2 tins of tuna. I've got a sieve, so a sieve has got smaller holes than a colander. And what I've done with that tin of tuna, or the tins of tuna, is I've opened them, I've put the sieve over the sink, and I've tipped the tins of tuna into the sieve. so that the liquid that the tuna comes in has drained away. I've left them in the sieve because that's just meaning that any excess that's in liquid is going to drain out for me. If you like cheese, then you can sprinkle some cheese on the top. I've got 50 grams here of cheddar. Doesn't matter what cheese you want to put on there, that's your choice. I've grated it. Again, you've seen me grate cheese. I'm not showing you how to do that. I expect you to know that. And if not, you can always look back at some of the previous videos. Things like the stuffed peppers. That's a good one for veg prep. And the last ingredient that I'm going to show you today is an onion. And I'm actually going to show you how to prepare an onion, because it's something that if you take food into year 9, we're going to expect you to be able to cut an onion up. Okay, so the onion's got brown papery skin. This brown papery skin is not good to eat. It's got a root that would grow out of the ground, and it's got a shoot that would grow out of the ground, and it's got a root that would grow in the ground and downwards. We want to keep the root on at all times, because this root will help to hold the onion together when we're cutting it up. This papery skin we need to lose, so at the shoot end at the top, I'm just going to carefully, and using a claw grip to hold the onion, just take that off. As it comes off, I'm then going to peel the rest of this papery skin off. If your next layer down has still got papery skin on it or brown skin on it, you can absolutely take one more layer of onion off. That's not a problem. I'm then going to take my onion and, holding it in a bridge grip up and over the top, I'm going to cut through the middle here so that I get some root on each half of the onion. So I'm just going to cut through, keeping my fingers well away from the knife at all times. So I've now got some root on each end of the onion. This root will hold it together for the next little piece. I'm going to put the flat edge down, so I've got a nice straight edge, flat edge for it to sit on. I'm going to hold it in a bridge grip, and I'm going to cut in the direction of the lines of the onion, not cutting through the root end. So I'm going to cut downwards, minding my fingers at all times. I can't cut in every single line, but I'm going in the direction of the lines, and I've made about 5 cuts. I then turn the onion a quarter of a turn, and I change to a claw grip, and I hold the onion together with my finger and thumb on either side pressing in, and I'm going to cut the onion into a dice, and you'll see there it's quite nice and fine. The last little bit, actually, this top layer there was actually quite slippery, so I've not used that one. This last little bit here actually is where the enzymes of the onion are. If you can avoid cutting into the very last little bit at the bottom, and you'll see when you cut through the root, you'll see what I mean. They actually are the enzymes that might make you cry, so it's sometimes worth trying to avoid those. Because that other half of the onion, that particular layer was slippery, I'm going to take that one off on this side. So again, holding in a bridge grip up and over the top in the direction of the lines of the onion, but not going through the lines, because I can't manage to do that, there's a lot of them, and making sure that I don't cut through the root. I go down and cut downwards about 5 times. Turn the onion into a claw grip, using my finger and thumb to push the onion sides together, and always watching where my fingers are and moving my fingers away from the knife. And I've ended up with my waste there, which I'm going to get rid of now. So once you've got everything prepared, you're going to then put your kettle on to boil, which I've just done for a minute ago before I started this film. So everything's prepared. I don't want you stopping halfway through and thinking, oh, I need something. And actually, I've just thought of one more thing that I do need. So let me just get this out. One of those. And one of those. You're going to need a little bit of oil later on to do some frying off with your vegetables. So I've got some oil there, and I'm going to need a teaspoon of oil. So I'm going to take a teaspoon out. And the last ingredient that you need to have on the ready is a tin of chopped tomatoes. I know chopped tomatoes and pasta were really hard to come by at the start of lockdown. However, I think by now you should be able to get pasta and a tin of tomatoes, chopped tomatoes. So I'm going to open those tin of tomatoes ready. Okay. And then I'm going to start getting myself organised to cook. I'm going to do is to take my pasta and put in a saucepan all of my pasta. There's no water in there yet, but you must add water before you put it on the heat. So my kettle, which boiled about 2 or 3 minutes before I started this video, I'm going to take and I'm going to pour water from the kettle over the pasta. Now I don't put the water in first and then tip the pasta in, because if I did that, as the pasta hit the water, the boiling water would spatter up and could burn me. So please, pasta in first and then cover the pasta with the boiling water. You're going to cover it and then you're also going to add about 1 centimetre extra water on the top of your saucepan. This saucepan needs to be quite large to be able to accommodate that. I'm going to put my kettle safely back away. And so now my pasta is sitting in some quite hot water. I'm going to take my pasta, which is in the saucepan, put it on the heat, and I'm going to turn the heat on. Now I'm going to have to keep half an eye on this, and what I'm looking for the pasta water to do is for it to boil. That's lots of bubbles coming to the surface very, very quickly. When it boils, I quite quickly need to turn it down so that it simmers. Simmering is smaller bubbles coming to the surface more slowly. It needs to simmer for however long your packet of pasta takes to cook. So my pasta generally takes between 10 and 12 minutes to cook. So now that's on, I'm going to keep a little eye on it, but what I'm going to ask you to do is to come around in a moment. I'm going to stop the video, you're going to come around and I'm going to talk you through how you get your sauce ready. My pasta has been on the heat for just a couple of minutes, on quite a high heat, and I've been watching it, and if you can see now there's lots of bubbles coming to the top quite quickly. This is boiling, and at this stage I need to turn it down. If I left it, all the pasta would release some of its starch and it forms like it makes like a foam which goes up and over the top and will go on top of your hob, which you don't want. So at this point I'm going to turn it down just a little to a simmer, and a simmer is slightly slower, smaller bubbles coming to the surface, still frequently but a little bit slower. So if you can see there, this is a simmer. Some people want to stir pasta the whole time it's cooking. Please don't do that, because it releases too much starch, and all it needs is just when it's bubbling in the pan like that, one stir with a wooden spoon, never a metal spoon because the heat will conduct and burn you, and then you can just leave it. I've set a timer for 12 minutes because that's how long my pasta should take to cook, and I'll come back and check on it in about 10 to 12 minutes. Now my handles at the moment are sticking forwards, and if someone was to walk past this, they could potentially knock the pan over and burn themselves. So I'm going to turn the handles of my pan, of the water that's boiling, backwards and away from any heat. So I wouldn't turn the handle and have it over this hob here in case it got turned on. So it's away from any heat and it's away to the side so no one can knock it. Right, I'm going to start then on making my sauce, my sort of tomato-y sauce that's going to be for my pasta bake. So into this saucepan then, I've got another wooden spoon that I'm going to use, and I am going to need this wooden spoon a little bit more than the other one. I'm going to put just 1 or 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil in. So there's one, and that's quite a large one, so I'm going to go for another half. A teaspoon is the spoon that you'd use to make yourself a cup of tea. That's just normal cooking oil. It could be sunflower oil, vegetable oil, whatever. Into that I'm going to add my onion. No heat is on in this pan yet, and I'm going to add my onion. And I'm then going to turn my heat on to a medium heat. Okay, depends what size your ring is. So if you remember back to your cooker investigation, if you've got a large ring, it would have more heat coming into it. So you'd want it on probably a little bit lower. And if I was using a smaller ring like this ring here, which isn't turned on, otherwise I wouldn't be touching it, I would be able to use, I'd have to use a hotter flame. So I'm going to just turn the onion around in the pan. Now depending on whether you've got gas or electric, this might take just a few moments. I'm on gas. Gas works quite quickly because the flame brings instant heat. So it probably will take me a minute or two. If you're on electric, it just takes those few minutes for the electric to come through. Now you might be able to start hearing the onions sizzling a little bit. That's good. Now, if you find that your flame is too hot, you are in control of the heat. Just like you're in control of this pan with the boiling water with pasta in, you can turn the heat down. I would strongly suggest at this stage that you have your parent or carer watching you and helping you. Okay, because you've only used the hob once before, and that was for the flapjack. So this onion has been sizzling away for about a minute. It hasn't got colour on it, but it's just starting to get a little bit soft. So into the onion, I'm going to add some of the vegetables. This is where you would add things like the courgettes, things like the peppers, and things like the mushrooms. Now my pan is going to be very, very crowded because I'm putting a lot of veg into this, because I quite like a lot of veg in a pasta bake. And all I'm going to do is turn the vegetables around, and I can start to smell that onion cooking. It's lovely. But I want to try and get the bits that are on the bottom up so that they aren't getting burnt on the bottom. I've just had a look over. If you have a little look in my pan with the boiling water, you'll see that it's still simmering, but it's slowed down a little bit because the heat's come out of the pan just a little. I've turned it up ever so slightly, but I need to keep watching that, because if it goes too fast, I'll need to turn it down. The other thing to watch is to make sure your pasta is always covered by the water. If it starts to absorb all of the water, you might need to add just a little bit more water from your kettle. Now I can see my onion is already starting to go brown around the edges, around the side of this pan. So it's up to you at which point you want to stop and add the next ingredients, but you don't want to make this inedible, so you don't want anything to burn. So a little bit of brown is okay, burnt is not. And don't forget, this is all going to be cooked in the oven as well for about 20 minutes, so it doesn't matter if it's not quite as brown as you would like. So at this stage, I know that if you have a look in there, it's not really very brown, it's not really very fried off, but I know that I will burn the onions if I give it too much more heat. So I'm going to cool the pan down just a little bit and add some liquid to it. So I'm going to add in my tin of chopped tomatoes, and I'll hear it sort of sizzle in a strange way because the liquid's gone in. I'm going to turn that around in there. Because I've used quite a lot of vegetables, and this depends on whether you're making just enough for one person or whether you're doing your family's dinner, because there's quite a lot of veg there and I've got quite a lot of tomato still left in this can, I'm going to put some cold water from the tap up to about a quarter full of this tin, and I'm going to swirl out the inside of the tin so I get all these little bits out of the tin into my dish. But also I add a little bit more liquid, so I'm just going to get some cold water. There we are, so there's cold water in there. I'm just going to move the water around inside the tin, just to incorporate that tomato. And then I'm just going to tip, oh, that way, sorry. I'm trying to get as much in as I can. There we are. Lovely. Now once you've added your tomatoes, that's when you should stop. If it starts to get a little bit brown, that's when you should stop the browning by adding your tomatoes and any liquid. At this stage, you can then add any peas, any sweet corn, any ham and any tuna. Now as I said to you, I used courgettes instead of sweet corn or peas. That was my other option. I'm not using ham, but I have got my tuna. So I'm going to take my tuna, and if you can see there's a few quite large lumps here. Just going to use my knife just to break some of those up. I do want a few chunks, but I don't want them too big. So my tuna's going to go in. Okay. give this just a little stir, like this, so that everything gets combined with that lovely tomatoey sauce. And then what you're going to do, and this is where you need to be a bit of an octopus, because you've got a timer on for the pasta, you're going to need to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, your mushrooms, if you're using them, should be going soft. Courgettes and peppers, if you're using them, should be going soft. The tuna we could eat anyway as it is from the tins, we don't need to worry about tuna, but the peas will have defrosted and be warmed up, and also your sweet corn will be nice and warm in there as well. So we're going to then, I'm going to pause the video, we're going to simmer this for 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, and simmering is these little bubbles coming to the surface gradually, so it's going quite fast now. I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. 5 minutes, going to maybe stir it after 2 minutes, stir it after another 2 minutes, and then come back to it after the 5 minutes, and I'm going to turn that heat off and do nothing else. I'm going to come back to you though when my pasta is cooked, so by the time you come back, my sauce will be turned off and my pasta will be ready to drain. My timer has just gone off for 12 minutes to say my pasta has been in the water on the heat for 12 minutes and been boiling and then simmering for 12 minutes. As you can still see, there's lots of bubbles coming up to the surface, which is good. And you can see that the pasta has changed colour, it's gone a slightly lighter colour. You'll also notice that it has expanded because the pasta absorbs the water. Dried pasta needs to be rehydrated with water so that it becomes soft, so the water gets absorbed, it makes the pasta soft and ready to eat. At this stage I want to test and see if the pasta is cooked. To do that, I take a piece of pasta out, make sure that there's not a lot of water on your spoon if you can. I'm just going to place it into my colander here and just give it a moment or two to cool down. The pasta's still boiling, that's okay. You need to give it a couple of seconds to cool down. Now we're going to try this in a minute when it's cooled down, but you need to be very aware that this pasta is very hot at the moment, and so we don't want to burn our mouths. So it might be this is something that you ask your parents to check for you, and what we're looking for is a nice soft bite on the pasta and not hard in the middle. This has had probably 30 seconds now. I'm going to feel it with my fingers and it's still warm but it's not burning hot. I'm going to blow on it and then I'm going to try this pasta. It is soft in the middle, which means this pasta needs to be turned off the heat. At this stage then, you're going to drain this pasta. I need you to take your colander, the pasta can stay there and that's okay, and because my sauce has had its 5 minutes, I've turned the heat off, and again I'm going to turn my pan handles away so nobody is going to have an accident and knock that off the hob and burn themselves. I'm going to take my colander, I'm going to put it into my sink. If you've got a colander with a foot like this, it's really helpful because it sits in the sink and your hands can be well away, because the next stage is possibly the most dangerous bit that you're going to do in this recipe. You definitely need your parents to help you with this one, or your carers to help you with this, and if they would prefer, they can do this bit for you. I'm going to take my pan of pasta very carefully over to the sink, making sure that nobody else is there and in the way, because I don't want to knock into anybody with this pasta. It is boiling hot. I'm going to take the handle of my pan and I'm going to tip the water and I'm going to aim towards the colander. I'm aiming the pan away from me, so I'm tipping the water away from me. I don't want to tip it this way because it could splash and burn me. So I'm going away from me and I'm tipping the pasta into the colander. Like that. Once it's all out, you might find, as I often do, there's a couple of bits of pasta that just stick in the pan. That's okay. Now, once all the water's drained, you can lift it up. Like I said, if you've got a colander with handles on the side, that makes life easier. And you can just put this either back in your pan or straight into your oven-proof dish. Now, not all colanders look like this. A different colander might be one you actually have to hold, that's a bit like a saucepan. If you've got one of these, please ask your parent or carer to do that stage for you. So last little stage of this recipe then before it goes into the oven. I've got my pasta drained. Now if your pasta was only about a quarter of the way up your saucepan, you could mix all this together in your saucepan. However, my pasta was at least halfway up my saucepan. If I then add all of my tomatoey sauce to it, it will be too much to be able to mix it properly. So I'm going to put it straight into my oven-proof dish. So in my pasta goes. It doesn't matter that it's drained for a few minutes, it just means it's a little bit cooler. You can see the steam coming off that, so make sure as you put it in, you're putting it in away from yourself. Now those few little bits of pasta I said to you they've got stuck in there, I'm going to take them out and avoiding all the water that's collected in the bottom of the saucepan, I'm going to put those in because it's nice not to waste food. Okay. I'm going to put that onto a ring that hasn't been lit. A bit like you did with your flapjack, you put it onto a ring that hasn't been lit so it doesn't burn the pan. Obviously now all of my hob is turned off. Then I take my tomatoey mixture with the vegetables in it and any tuna or chopped ham, and I add that in. And now this is where I've made a lot of pasta bake here. Might even be enough for 4 adults, which is a bit of an issue. You're going to gently mix the sauce around and all the vegetables around your pasta. And this is why, if you can do it in your saucepan, it's better because it won't go up the sides of your dish. I think that is most of it combined now. There is probably a few bits of pasta that aren't. I think most of it is. You can see I've made a mess, so when I come to wipe the surfaces down later, you're going to have to, or I'm going to have to be careful to make sure I clean up properly. There we are. There, I think that's it now. So at this stage, it's nearly ready for the oven. You're going to take your cheese that you grated what seems like a long time ago. You're going to sprinkle your cheese on top. If you've got some homemade breadcrumbs or some breadcrumbs left over from when we did fish fingers, you could absolutely put a few breadcrumbs, not fish fingers, breadcrumbs on top, and that would gratinate and make a nice crunchy topping on there if you wanted to. I'm not going to today though. Oh, yeah. The last little bit of cheese I'm going to sprinkle on there. This then is going to go onto the baking tray, which I said to you earlier I've got ready so that I can get this in and out the oven easier. And then I'm going to put this into the oven. Quick reminder of getting this in and out the oven safely. Oven gloves go on, somebody holds the oven door open for you, or you're holding the oven open for your parent or carer. You're going to count to 3 to let that initial blast of hot air out of the oven. After 3 you're going to carefully place it onto the shelf. This pasta bake takes about 15 to 20 minutes, just so that the cheese melts nicely. The vegetables, if they're not entirely soft, go a bit softer. And then some of the liquid that's in the tomatoey sauce will evaporate a bit. It's a reduction sauce, you're reducing it down, you're making it slightly thicker. So this is going to go into the oven, you know how to do that safely. And then I will show you just at the end when this comes out in about 15 or 20 minutes time. So the pasta bake has come out of the oven. Now I've got to be very honest with you, I've just, in between putting it in the oven, I've washed up, which you will do as well, and I've also made the jam tart demonstration for you, which is for the week before, you'll see this. So my pasta bake has been in about 15 minutes too long, okay? So your pasta bake will not be as golden as this, and your pasta will not be quite as crunchy as this on the top. However, you can see that the cheese has melted, and you can see from the sides that our pasta underneath is all nicely covered with that beautiful sauce and those vegetables. So this is then going to be served for dinner. Obviously, to get this out of the oven, when the timer went off, I had oven gloves on. Somebody opened the door for me and I counted to 3 to let that hot air escape before carefully lifting up the baking tray and taking it out of the oven. Okay, obviously it's fine if your parent or carer does that for you to keep you safe. These containers and the tray will stay hot for a very, very long time. So even though this has been out the oven probably for 10 minutes while I did the washing up after jam tarts, this would still be too hot to touch. But this now is ready to serve up for your dinner, and I really hope that you enjoy feeding your family this one. Thank you very much.